The biggest thing he showed me is that it can be done. And if somebody else can do it, I know I can do it. It goes back to the military. The first time I had to jump out of an airplane, the only reason I did that is because the guy in front of me did it. There's the old adage of like, if your friend jumps off a bridge, are you going to? And it's like, well, yeah, if they land okay.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, now offering a $250 per unit project allowance to new clients in West Michigan. Find out more at livegreenlocal.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 311. My guest today is implementing the skills he learned in the Army as a member of the elite 75th Ranger Regiment to scale his wholesaling business to six figures while maintaining his W-2 job. Dan Austin is the owner of INW Properties, a completely virtual company primarily focused on the acquisition of small multifamily and single-family homes. They wholesale, flip, and BRRRR their own deals and currently hold a portfolio of 25 doors. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I'm super excited to be here.
First of all, thank you for your service to our country. You are a member of the elite, or a past member of the elite 75th Ranger Regiment. And before our conversation, we were talking about the elite. And it made me think, okay, I want to start off by just asking you, in your words, what does elite mean? And how did that apply to you in the Army? And how does that apply to you in real estate?
It's kind of something I think we all strive to do. I don't think anybody tries to do something and be the average 75th Ranger Regiment or the normal. And so, in the military, as I looked at it, I kind of joined the military without knowing what I was going to do or what even the military was. I really had no context. I kind of just stepped into it. But I quickly found in the military, there's like all these different badges and things you can do. And so I was always thinking like, well, I want to get that next step, do that next step and grow and be, grow my career and be bigger regardless of where I was at. And that's how I found myself into the elite 75th Ranger Regiment, which really is a group of men and women now. It was just a strictly male unit when I was in, that go after and the hardest targets on kill capture type missions for some of the top terrorists at the time in Iraq and Afghanistan when I was serving, and really try to do everything you can to be the best. And there's a Ranger Creed that talks about that. And every stanza, as I reflect on it now, every stanza, there's 5 stanzas, and the beginning of each stanza starts with the letter that spells Ranger. And they really all talk about, having grit. They talk about, being the best you can be. And that's, no pun intended, that's the Army slogan, but really doing all these things the best you can to the best of your ability, not just for you, but also for your brothers, to your left and right. And I think about that in the investment space, especially as I have a business partner too. And when I think about things and I'm doing that, I'm like, how can I be the best business partner, right? How can I be the best owner of this business? And what does it take? Sometimes it's grit. When I first started out in real estate, it was staying until late nights at a rental property, trying to get it ready to go. And thankfully I've graduated from that and have people to do that for me now. Other times it's just like grinding it out and figuring things out. And then also thinking not how am I going to make this deal great, but like, how am I going to make this business great? How are we going to be able to scale and be more of a visionary and elevate the game, so to speak, for ourselves?
Tell us a little bit about yourself and then how you got started investing in real estate.
I'll take it all the way back to the military. As we've talked about, when I was 18, I joined the Army, was in the 75th Ranger Regiment, and I stayed in the military for the first 8 years of my adult life. But that's really where my investing actually started. I wasn't sophisticated. I wasn't doing real estate, but I had a team leader. I was a brand new 18-year-old private in the Army. And he sat me down in front of a computer and he said, the government offers this thing called the Thrift Savings Plan. I had no idea what he's talking about. Essentially, it's a 401k for federal employees. And he's like, I'm setting you this up and we're going to put a certain amount of money into it and you're never going to think about it again. And he would just kind of told me about the value of time, when you're invested. So if you start young, it'll grow. And honestly, he did that. He set it up and there was money coming out of my paycheck. I didn't even know how to get to it, see it. I didn't know what I was invested in, right? I just did it. I had no idea. And as the years went on in the military, I started thinking about leaving in the military and preparing myself, to be financially stable and all those sorts of things. And I kind of went back to that conversation and started doing my research and started kind of getting involved in that probably a year or two before I left the military. And it was awesome that he did that for me. He didn't have to, but it set me up, not because I had money when I got out, but it set me up to start thinking about it, right? And then as I left the military, leaving a pretty elite unit and wanting to always be the best at what I was going to do, that's kind of what I sought every step of the way after I left the military, including, I went to a local university when I moved back to Spokane and said, what degree should I get? I'm looking for a hard degree because I figured it'll be, more profitable for me in the end, and there'll be less people trying to get that degree. So maybe easier to get a job, right? That's kind of what I was focused on, because this was 2010 when I left the military. So the economy wasn't great and all those sorts of things. So I ended up getting a degree in electrical engineering, and then right away started working for the company I work for now, which is a local electric and gas utility in town. And started out as an engineer, and I realized this isn't like the greatest thing for me. I don't love it. I can do it. It's not my superpower though. And then I started reflecting back on what things made me great and what things made the military great. And really a big piece of that was leadership and all the foundational things that come with being a leader. And so within 11 months of being an engineer, I had stepped out of engineering and moved right into leadership and just started leading different teams and doing different things for my company and growing my career there. And then I kind of got into that a couple years into it. And I thought, I want more out of life. And I kept reflecting on, investing and doing, starting when you're young, back from that first conversation in the military with my team leader. And I ran into a friend of mine who's one of my best friends now. And he was investing in real estate, just kind of buying student rentals in our local market. And I just was fascinated by that. And then within a year of that, I was like ready to invest. And I put it on pause because I had to move for my job to a different location. And back then I was like, well, I'll have to wait till I come back to Spokane to start that. And, reflecting back, that was not a good strategy. I should have just dove right into it. But anyways, I moved back within a year and a half and started by buying a student rental. I was, mimicking what I had seen my friend do. And then I bought a second one. And this was like 2016 to 2018 timeframe. I bought those two and they're doing great. They're awesome. Cash flow, everything was good about them, but I couldn't find more. I was trying to buy them off the MLS, and the market, as has continued to heat up across the country. And so another friend of mine who had started investing as well approached me, and he pitched me this idea, which essentially was, an off-market real estate company. Like, we find leads off market, wholesale company, with the intention of just buying the best, right? Buy the best deals we can, and then we'll wholesale the rest. And so we started that business late 2019 and officially sent our first batch of marketing out March of 2020, which wasn't the best time to start a business right before COVID hit. But fortunately, we didn't know what we didn't know. We just kept our foot on the gas pedal and just kept going and kind of worked through it and learned. It was just me and him in the beginning. And now we have, I think we just hired another employee. So I think we're up to like 5 or 6, if you count our virtual assistant, 6 employees. And we're all virtual, but we do have 2 employees here in Spokane that do work for us, but we don't have an office space or anything like that. And now we are doing wholesales, flips, BRRRR, any of the properties we can. And so, as you mentioned, 25 properties, and they all are really, really good with an average cash flow of, I think I just did the math this morning. Our average cash flow per door is like $700 right now. So it's pretty profitable for us on that side of things, but it still continues to be hard to find the best when you're looking at $700 per door and other deals line up and it's like $200 per door, but you're like, but that's still a good deal, right? And so anyhow, yeah, we're now, we run our business in Spokane, but we also have a virtual market in Knoxville.
Starting with the student rentals, you got into that because a good friend of yours was doing it and showed you how to do it. What did he show you, and how specifically did you apply that to your first investment in student rentals?
He showed me that if somebody else can do it, I can do it. He was doing it, right? If I hadn't known him, I personally may not have taken that leap because I'm a little bit more conservative. But it goes back to the military. The first time I had to jump out of an airplane, the only reason I did that is because the guy in front of me did it, right? I know there's the old adage of like, if your friend jumps off a bridge, are you going to? And it's like, well, yeah, if they land okay. But then along the way, He showed me all of these little tips and tricks about landlording, about how to stabilize the property, and really just step by step. I mean, he was super, super willing to share everything, right? Which is a big part of the real estate industry, in my opinion. We're all kind of working on the same team, it feels like most of the time. But I would say, back to my point, the biggest thing he showed me is that it can be done. And if somebody else can do it, I know I can do it.
There's a certain leap of faith there to what you just said. You saw your friend do it, so you figured, hey, I can do it. But there's also the knowledge and experience that comes with doing it right. So did you have your friend there walking you through it, holding your hand every step of the way? Or did you kind of just take a leap and say, all right, I'm going to just make it work? And if so, what kind of mistakes did you make?
He did hold my hand, especially through the first one. And he's also a licensed broker. So he represented me on the purchase, kind of helped me walk me through, getting the financing lined up and what my options were to do that, like literally step by step. And then I did do some renovations and I did it myself. And he showed me like, you should do this, right now, since like this wall is opened up, you might want to replace that or this or that, so that in 3 or 4 years from now, you're not tearing it open because you have a clogged pipe or little stuff like that. He taught me. And then he taught me the landlord management piece, right? Here's the lease. Here's why these certain things are in the lease on a student rental. These are the things you need to look out for with students. And really, I mean, it was kind of a step-by-step masterclass in student rentals. And then I bought my second one, which was next door. And he kind of walked me. That one I actually bought off market because the lady next door, I had known her as her neighbor, so to speak. And she had passed away. And then he kind of stepped me through that whole process of, buying it off market and again, stabilizing it and going through it. And after that, I felt like I had some pretty good knowledge. He still teaches me things now and then, though.
You were very lucky to have a friend like that who knew the ropes and was willing to teach them to you. For any listeners who don't have a friend like that, what would you advise them if they wanted to get into the student rental market?
I would say go find a friend like that. The reason I say that is he wouldn't have been my friend hadn't I heard somebody say he was investing in real estate. I would have known him. He worked at the same office as me at the time, but somebody was, this guy, he's a really great guy. And by the way, he invested in real estate. And I literally immediately walked out of my cube, walked over to his cubicle and introduced myself. We started talking and it wasn't like I was asking him right then and there, teach me, I want to buy a rental. It was kind of developed the relationship over a period of time. And then I think 2 years after that, 2.5, 3 years after that, maybe was my opportunity. And he actually brought it to me and said, hey, I know you want to invest in student rentals. Here's a good opportunity. And as I reflect on the success of our business since that point, it's been about networking and finding people, not seeking out the benefit in that person, but building that relationship, because at some point there's going to be a mutual benefit for both of you.
So what would have happened had you learned that your coworker there was a real estate investor and you had not approached him?
I honestly probably would have never been in real estate. I just don't know that I would have made that leap without that. Maybe I would have found a different person because it was something that interested me, obviously. I mean, it was something I was looking at. Right after I met him, I started listening to Bigger Pockets and all that sort of stuff. So maybe, but it would have been delayed probably significantly by several years just because I know myself and how conservative I am.
This moment of hearing that this coworker is invested in real estate and you immediately going up to introduce yourself to him or talk to him, it strikes me that most people probably would not have done that. Why did you do that?
It was just intuition, something that I knew that I was interested in and I want to do. And you're right. I'm not that guy either. I'm kind of the guy in the corner at the event, not really mingling a whole ton, but it was just something in me said, you got to do this, find this person. And even today in our business, my business partner is much more of the networker. And so I've put on my kind of plan, like, hey, I'm going to get out and meet with certain people because I have to force myself to do it. But I always love doing it once I do it, right? It's just not on my priority. I fill my schedule up with like tangible work tasks, and networking for me is not one of those tangible work tasks, but I've had to change my mind to make that happen, to make that leap. Because what I found with real estate, especially, and anything in life, is it's so much easier if you're going into something together with people.
So you did your first 2 student rentals. You did a lot of your own rehab yourself, it sounds like. Where did you learn how to do the rehab?
1, my friend that was helping me with student rentals, and 2, YouTube. I've always been somewhat handy. I'm not, completely out of that world, but I taught myself how to drywall, plumbing, and some electrical. I've kind of been able to do an entire house top to bottom through those 2 student rentals between my friend, asking other people too, and a lot of YouTube, I'm not going to lie. And some of my early work wasn't so pretty, but I'm really glad I did that. Not everybody you don't need to do that. Not everybody should do that, but it helped me, especially now as I'm kind of interviewing contractors and as I'm hiring contractors to do work and kind of talking through them, the project and what we want to do. I have some context and understanding of like, I see why this person wants to charge me more for that, because that part of this job is not fun, right? And so you kind of understand some of that sort of stuff. So it has helped me personally along the way, but it's definitely not something everybody needs or should do.
What came next? You did the 2 student rentals and then you went off in what direction?
So after that, I started putting offers on houses that popped up on the MLS. And at the time, the way I was analyzing deals, I was like, these aren't deals. Had I known that in our home market, those same houses would be 30 or 40% higher in value, I would have definitely increased my offer prices. But at the time, I just couldn't find anything. And that's when my business partner now, who's a friend of mine, a different friend that I met at college, had approached me with this idea. He was having the same struggle. He was kind of not being able to find any good deals, and he really wanted to scale. And I was looking to scale, and we had complementary skills. And so we just sat in a coffee shop one afternoon, I think it was about this time of year, and talked through it and came back to my wife. And I told her, what's the worst can happen? We lose some money and try something, and like, let's do it. Jumped in head first and went with it. And that's where we kind of brainstormed the idea for what our business is today as a wholesale business, that we've also started doing flipping just because we can. And it's, more profit on some stuff, and then really continue to buy more units for that passive income.
Anyone who listens to this show knows that Green Property Management manages my entire West Michigan residential portfolio. They manage single families all the way up to large apartment complexes. Marty and his team are running a new special that I think is absolutely nuts. And I tried to tell him so, but he wouldn't listen to me. They want to offer new clients a $250 per unit project allowance to have their in-house licensed crew tackle any project, big or small, for new clients. I can tell you from personal experience that their unique management style will save you money, eliminate headaches, and increase your net operating income. You add on top of that this limited time offer of $250 per unit for new clients, and it really becomes a no-brainer. So text GREEN250 to 21000 or visit them on the web at livegreenlocal.com and tell Marty I think he's gone off the deep end with this absolutely nuts $250 offer. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. Talk about that conversation with your friend. Like, you went out, you had some dinner or drinks or whatever, and you're expressing your vision for this company that the two of you might do together. Tell us about that conversation.
I honestly didn't know a lot about what he was talking about at the time. I mean, I sort of did, but it was like, hey, Dan, like you're struggling to find deals. I'm struggling to find deals as well. Like, I think that there's this idea that you can buy them off market at a discounted price because you're not dealing with realtor fees and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, so how do you do it? He's like, well, you can send letters to people, this and that. And really, we both still didn't have a lot of context. But the one thing he did say is, hey, I connected with this person on Instagram and they teach a course in this, or they, have a mastermind. And that was probably the biggest pivotal moment for us to actually learn and scale. So we joined a group of people like ourselves looking to learn how to do this. And within that group, we have great friends and people that we utilize. And it goes back to that network effect, networking and getting to know people. And really within that, it was like steel sharpening steel within that group. So we had, the person that was leading the mastermind kind of having some structured education for honestly a reasonable price for what they were teaching us. And then more so over the long period of time is the friends that we've made through that network that have all these creative ideas that we can pass back and forth. Like, hey, what are you doing on, refinance lenders? Or, hey, how are you, operating, an Airbnb or any of that stuff. And so that network there has probably been the biggest thing. And back to that initial conversation was really the leap of faith we both took at that time, because we still both didn't know what we didn't know.
Can you say who the mastermind was?
Ryan Dossie, he runs CCF, Consistent Cash Flow. And I think he had just started it when we really jumped into it. Like he maybe had been running it for 6 months to a year. I can't remember. And there was only like 30 or 40 members. And now it's grown quite a bit. It's a great group, great engagement from Ryan and the team. And we've learned a ton. It's been so fantastic.
It's great that you found this mastermind group. You found some training. Did it also provide kind of the systems that you put in place to be the backbone of your business?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So right out the gate, we started out with our CRM, our customer relationship management system. We use RE Simply for that. And then how do we comp properties? So we use PropStream to do that. What else? And then all of our mail providers, cold caller services, all that sort of stuff. It was kind of like here you go. And then since we started with that backbone of our system, which is a way to get leads, a way to bring them into your system, and then a way to basically comp them, we've kind of manipulated that to what we like and kind of learned enough that we've kind of changed a few things here and there and kind of grown our business for us in our markets.
How long did it take once you found this mastermind group and this training and this system to implement it? And what were some of the first deals you did?
It took us, I think, from the get-go to actually sending our first batch of mailers was 12 weeks. So we just followed the program and just did it. And it was really great. It was step by step. And we just kind of had some faith just kind of going through it. And my business partner is really good at the technology stuff and helping pivot and all that sort of stuff. Because in this business, when you're first starting out, like you do need to make all these like pivots to make sure you're doing things and have some leap of faiths into them. But our first deal, so we struggled a little bit for the first few months, but our first deal was a nice property here in town. And we wholesaled it to a flipper. And that was, I think we made like $7,500. In hindsight, we could have made a lot more, but we didn't know what we were doing yet. And so that was our first deal. And then we kind of had some of those trickle in. This would have been summer 2020 and just slowly started trickling in. And then also we started buying some of those units and renovating those, which was really tough to grow a business where you're trying to wholesale and flip while also managing renovations and stabilizing properties kind of in parallel, because you have this friction and this tension of where to put your money. Do you put it to grow your lead generating business, or do you put it to grow your, stabilized property, passive cash flow business? And if you have unlimited funding, you can do both, but we didn't at the time. So we were constantly having this tension, and that's where it kind of slowed us down a little bit, got into some bigger rehabs than we had expected. But then once we kind of figured out our focus of where we need to focus our funds and our money, then we were kind of off to the races at that point.
That tension of not having enough money to kind of get you through the deals, is that still there, or have you figured out the money piece? And if so, how?
I would say it's not there, but it's always kind of there in a way, because even as a business that's profitable and making, having good revenues come in, we're trying to grow it, right? And so you have to know where to put your money. It's kind of like analyzing a deal. You want to buy a single family home or apartment building, is apartment building A better than apartment building B? And what are you looking at ROI wise? And so, yes, that tension's somewhat there, but now we actually have some relief and we actually get paid for what we're doing now. We're not doing it for free anymore. And we've built up some good wealth and passive income that just kind of keeps trickling in, while also we have this kind of steady, we have faith, I guess, so to speak, that even if we had to run our bank account down to zero for whatever reason, next month, we know based on our data, we're going to bring in 3 to 5 more deals that are going to bring some more revenue in.
Talk about how you're making money on the different strategies that you're employing.
Obviously, passive cash flow. So we have that coming from our properties, and that's just kind of that reoccurring nice income that we're all trying to get. And then we have our wholesale fees, which we're doing right now, anywhere between 3 to 5 wholesales a month. I think October is going to be a little higher. We'll probably do like 8, but on average, you can expect 3 to 5 easily from us. But then we also peel some off to flip.
When you say wholesale fee, are you charging a fee when you wholesale, or are you just charging kind of the delta above what you're able to acquire it for and then wholesale for?
Just the delta, really. So if we can acquire a property, we were just reviewing one this morning, a real not a nice property, needs a ton of work. The seller wants to offload it. And we said, hey, we can take this, from you 2 weeks, you'll be out of here. And we have a buyer for it, a house flipper. And so we know what they'll want to pay for it. And so we'll just get that delta between it, some, $10,000, $15,000 or something like that.
Is that what you're typically looking for? 10 to 15,000?
Yeah, exactly. And then we have bigger wins sometimes that are, in the six figures going into something. Like we had one last year that was about $100,000 fee on some land that we honestly didn't know that it would be that big. We were negotiating with the seller and we weren't sure we were going to be able to even offload the thing because we didn't know what to do. It was commercial real estate, 5 acres of land. And we had a buyer that said, hey, I will pay you this much for that. And we're like, okay. And so that you get those big wins. We probably get a big win like that every few months. And then typically we're not trying to, cut anybody deep on either side of the deal. We just want that consistent, $10,000 to $15,000 for a fee.
Keep going on the different strategies and how you're profiting.
Then we'll have some properties where we know that we're getting it at a good price, but it doesn't make sense for us to renovate and keep it as our own, one of our own units, just because the cash flow really isn't there, or the property value is a little bit too high, or it needs too much work. But within that bandwidth, we have those that are great flips. And we say, well, why don't we flip it ourselves as opposed to taking a smaller fee? And this is in our buy box of flips, which we can handle, where we want to, goes back to that tension. Hey, we only need to probably put 50,000 into this deal. Yeah, that's actually a good ROI. And so then we're just closing on a flip right now that the profit on that will be about 70,000. And so for us, that made sense because we didn't have to put a lot of money into it, and we made 70 instead of 10 or 15. So we usually have at least one flip in the pipeline at all times, sometimes two, because we'll have, just a lot going on. Like right now, I think we have 2 right now, but that's that other kind of big win. And so we have this steady stream of from passive. And then we have this other steady stream of base revenue from our wholesale fees. And then you have the big wins and then the flips that just stack onto it that really get you to that consistent 6 figures a month in revenue.
What's the biggest profit you've made?
I would say is that deal I was just talking about is about $100,000. But right now we're doing a renovation. That profit will be probably higher. And so what it was is a little bit higher end property in a really great location in Spokane. And we initially were going to flip it because we're like, yeah, this will be a good spread. We'll make about $70,000 on the flip. But as I walked it, I went around back and noticed the backyard was really big, and it's in a prime location where land and infill lots are really, precious. And went to the city and realized we could subdivide this and sell that second lot for about 150. So that'll probably be one of our bigger wins. So we're actually going to now keep that unit as opposed to flipping it. But if you look at it all in, we'd probably be a profit about 200,000 if we sold the house and the land. But we're going to keep that one. It's going to be one of our first Airbnbs because we just think location wise, it'll have a higher cash flow, and which is good for that higher price point property.
So you're getting into the Airbnb strategy now too.
Yeah, I'm going to try that. It's one of those things where we're not, all in on Airbnb, but we think if we can get a property that at least would cash flow as a long-term rental, but as an Airbnb would cash flow, say $1,000 a month, we might as well take it down and do it. But we're probably not going to be the 40 units of Airbnb because that's a lot of management. But, a couple here and there, I think will be great for our business, just to increase that cash flow. And then if something happens with Airbnb in our town, says no more Airbnb or it's not profitable, we can, sell the property or keep it as a long-term rental with, $200 of cash flow as opposed to our normal $700.
I'd like to talk about the systems that you put in place and the fact that your company is all virtual. Who is on your team? How are they on your team? And how much work are you putting in day to day on these different strategies?
I do work a W-2 job that keeps me busy 40 hours a week. And fortunately, my business partner has a little bit more freedom in his schedule to kind of dive into a lot of the day to day on that. So what it really looks like right now is you have me and my partner kind of leading the show. I handle most of all of the rehab processes and property stabilizations and kind of that whole segment of our business. And he focuses on acquisitions. And then within that acquisitions, we have what we call an acquisitions manager, and he's the person negotiating with our sellers. And then we have a dispositions manager, and he's negotiating with our buyers. So they're split kind of half and half. We get a deal under contract, and then one guy takes it and sells it to a flipper or another investor. And then we have what we call a leads manager, and he is remote. He actually lives in Nicaragua. He's an expat, and he basically intakes any call coming in. So if you get a postcard from us, he answers the phone when they call. And he also does a lot of our follow-up. So we might make contact with somebody and they're not ready to sell yet, but he'll follow up with them throughout the year and, maybe a week, 2 weeks, months. And then we also have a virtual assistant for us that works out of the Philippines, and he does all of our kind of just minutia within the business. And then within that, we've had some other virtual assistants off and on, but really that's kind of our core team right there that kind of handles everything.
Putting together this team and knowing how to put together the team and the key positions that were necessary, was this all part of the training that you received?
Yeah, it was partly. And so this is a big spot where we've evolved it. And also just talking to other investors, because it's honestly, in a small business like this, sometimes you have an employee that's really great at something, but you've put them in the wrong position. So we've had to reshape positions for employees, and our comp structures had to change several times based on that, because especially in a commission kind of based market where we're at with employees, is some employees are incentivized by certain things. So we've had to adjust our compensation structure to help kind of focus them in the areas of our business we need them. But generally speaking, what I just explained to you with the acquisitions, dispositions, lead manager, those are all generally standard positions within our industry, but we've kind of changed the functions of those as we've needed to for our business.
I'd like to get more specific on what you just said. You've had to change some of your employees or change their incentivization structure. Give us some examples of what you're talking about.
When we first started, what we found was, so we just gave a base salary and then we had a flat commission on all deals. But what we found with that employee was that they were incentivized by our performance, as in my partner and I's performance, because some things we'd flip and some things we would get these big wins that weren't expected, like that land deal where we made $100,000, right? And so this employee was compensated for that. And what we found was that they weren't really actually doing the day-to-day grind on these smaller deals, the 10 to 15,000, because it was like, well, why do that? I'll just kind of sit back and wait for these bigger deals, which is where my partner and I are doing most of the work. The lead comes in, they kind of handle it, and then we have to take over because it is a bigger deal and maybe more intricate. And so we had to change our comp structure to where it was more of a quantity-based system, which if they would have focused on that, then they would actually perform and make more money. And that was one example of a compensation structure of how we had to take this employee's skill set, which they were really good at certain areas, and then focus the incentive package around that.
Let's talk about your W-2 job. It sounds like you're really cranking it out with all the different strategies. Why do you still have a W-2 job? And just talk about the importance of having a W-2 job.
There's several reasons why I still have it. One, I don't hate it. I actually like it. I think I work for a really good company. And the people I work with at my company, I enjoy. And I kind of generally enjoy my job. I get to work on some of the innovative things in the utility industry, especially, with everything going on with decarbonization and all these other policies coming down. There's a lot of innovation going on in that industry. So I actually enjoy that. And then secondly, it's part of my personality, being a conservative person, not wanting to give up my healthcare benefits and all that sort of stuff with small kids at home and all of that. And then lastly, we're still in this newbie stage, I would say. We're seeing great success. But what I'm trying to prove to myself is that I can create that success and that I can pivot when that success kind of takes a turn. As many of us know, if you've been through any fluctuations in markets, you can either continue to pivot and grow with the market, whatever that market's doing, or you're kind of stopped in the tracks, right? You're dead. Everything you've done, you lost, and you're starting from scratch. And so what I'm trying to do right now is mentally prove to myself that, hey, you can create wealth consistently and you don't need the W-2 job as kind of a crutch sort of thing.
Are you seeing that utilities, energy, is this going to have an impact on rental property investors at some point?
I honestly hope it does in a good way. That's just me being a selfish landlord. There's got to be a better way. So our housing stock in our local market, some landlords aren't great. They buy a crappy property, leave it crappy. They don't do anything for it. And in reality, if they invested some good money and got good quality tenants that cared for it because they knew it was a nice place to live, you could do things like upgrade the windows that are energy efficient and those sorts of things. But I do think that it will. We're seeing it in Washington a little bit, but they don't do it necessarily through, go green laws. They do it through building codes, right? They do it through these other things, which is kind of the sneak attack, which I don't like. I don't want that. What I want to do is, hey, I'm renovating this 100-year-old house. Give me some incentives to replace a window that actually makes sense. Like not $5. Like if you covered like 30% of the cost of the window and it's going to save the tenant and all this money on energy, like that makes sense to me. But right now, those incentives don't match with what landlords need, because really at the end of the day, we're creating hopefully quality housing for folks, in many cases, affordable housing for folks. But we still do need some way. There's got to be something tied to that to keep the landlords and the property owners investing in the right areas.
Where are you headed next? You've got so much going on. It sounds like you're having great success with these different strategies. Is it just grow the business and scale, or are you looking at some other options as well?
My wife and I are actually right now negotiating to invest in a business, so non-real estate business. So that's another form of income for us. So I'm really trying to grow my passive income streams and diversify it, right? Why not have diversity within passive? It doesn't all have to be real estate. But from a business standpoint, yeah, absolutely. We're looking to scale our real estate business by expanding to more and more virtual markets, and then also looking at bigger asset classes. I'm not sure if apartments or syndication will be where we go with that, but we're definitely looking at trying to find some bigger asset classes, because everything we've heard is, it's just as easy to do a big deal as a little deal. Just the big deal has more money involved. And so looking at that to kind of streamline our business so that we're not kind of going through the churn of tons and tons of little deals for little money, but kind of maybe a fewer bigger deals with more cash flow involved. And that could be commercial, it could be industrial. We're reviewing kind of industrial/storage facility right now. So those sorts of deals too, but definitely want to continue to grow our foundation business, because that is what's producing great cash flow for us.
And then as we wrap it up, I want to just circle back to the conversation we had in the beginning about being an elite ranger, being the best investor you can be. How are you now applying that concept to what you're doing?
Really what it is like recognizing like every day I get to kind of pick how we're going to do things. Like how good are we going to be at this, and put in that extra effort. And I think back to all the stories and memories I have in the military of just those critical moments on the battlefield where you still have to make a decision, right? You're under pressure, things are happening, people's lives are at stake. And fortunately, in my day-to-day, that's not the case anymore. But being willing to make those hard decisions and those leaps of faith and believing in yourself, because at the end of the day, like that's all you have. When you're on the battlefield, you don't know at the end of the day if that decision is going to bring you home or bring your brethren home at night, but you have to make a decision in the moment. And through repetition and practice and belief in yourself, you really can make those decisions, especially in the real estate business, because it really does come down to, it's up to you to make those decisions. And people get stuck in that analysis phase and they just never do it, right? You've got to do it. And then what my partner and I do a lot with each other, even if it's a personal mistake or not, is we reflect back and say, yeah, probably let's not do that anymore, right? And so continue to sharpen the edges there and really being open about those mistakes we made and continue to move forward.
How would people get a hold of you, Dan?
Probably the best way is just hit me up on Instagram, Investorman Dan, or you can come. We have a podcast, Collecting Keys, that we recently started. So we'd love to have people listen, give us feedback on that. And that podcast, we really just talk about kind of the day-to-day investor stuff, the no BS kind of fluffy things, but really just talk about what it's like when you have tenants doing weird things or when you're struggling to grow a business. Kind of a fun show for my partner and I. And so, yeah, feel free to download and listen.
Well, Dan, it's been a real pleasure talking with you and learning about your experience from the Army to building your first couple student housing rentals. The fact that you just took the initiative to go talk to your coworker as soon as you found out that he was a real estate investor. I mean, that drive for doing better and applying that elite concept to your investing. Really interesting. The systems that you learned how to build to do the wholesale, the flips and the BRRRR. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And it's been a really interesting conversation. So thank you very much for having it with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Brian. This was great. I love it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, now offering a $250 per unit project allowance to new clients in West Michigan. Find out more at livegreenlocal.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.